My ungrateful children forged my will to steal everything. They didn't know I had a secret bank account. And the surprise heir. Elara sat perfectly still in her favorite armchair, the one upholstered in faded but still luxurious silk, a silent sentinel in the sun-drenched conservatory. The scent of jasmine, usually a source of quiet comfort, now seemed cloying, almost mocking the chill that had begun to seep into her very bones. The tablet resting on her lap felt suddenly heavy, not with its physical weight, but with the crushing burden of what it displayed. A series of vibrant, exuberant photos, posted just minutes ago to Serafina's public social media profile. Her son, Theron, and his wife, Serafina, were beaming, their faces bronzed by an exotic sun, crystal-clear turquoise waters stretching endlessly behind them. Champagne flutes clinked in one shot, a private yacht, the Serenity, unfurled its pristine white sails against a cerulean sky in another, and the grandchildren, Anya and Liam, their laughter almost audible through the screen, posed in front of ancient ruins, their designer swimwear contrasting sharply with the timeless stone. The caption beneath the album, a carelessly dismissive collection of hashtags, burned into Elara's vision. #FamilyGetaway, #NoStress, #ParadiseFound, #TooStrenuousForGrandma. A wave of profound, arctic calm settled over Elara. It wasn't the familiar sting of disappointment, nor the dull ache of a mother's heartbreak. This was something far deeper, a seismic shift in the very bedrock of her being. For decades, she had clung to the hope, however faint, that familial affection would eventually outweigh the relentless pursuit of her wealth. She had rationalized, excused, and forgiven, always telling herself that their youth, their ambition, their perceived needs justified their occasional thoughtlessness. Perhaps Theron was just a late bloomer, still finding his footing, and Serafina merely high-spirited, needing a little extra sparkle in her life. Elara had convinced herself that their demands were simply expressions of their burgeoning lives, and her role was to facilitate, to smooth the path, to be the silent, benevolent force behind their glittering facade. But this was not thoughtlessness. This was a calculated, deliberate act of exclusion, a public humiliation wrapped in a veneer of extravagant pleasure, financed entirely by her. The cold, hard truth of their contempt, once a distant, nagging doubt, now stood starkly illuminated. Only a week prior, Theron had presented the idea of this grand family vacation. A once-in-a-lifetime experience, to the Seychelles, he had called it, leaning in conspiratorially, his eyes glinting with an almost childlike enthusiasm that had, for a fleeting moment, rekindled a familiar maternal warmth in Elara's chest. He had emphasized the importance of creating lasting memories for the grandchildren, painting vivid pictures of turquoise lagoons and exotic fish. Elara, her heart swelling with a familiar, desperate hope for inclusion, for a shared family moment that transcended financial transactions, had readily agreed to cover the astronomical cost: first-class flights on a private charter, a sprawling beachfront villa with a dedicated staff, chartered yacht excursions to secluded coves, and gourmet chefs flown in for bespoke dining experiences. It had been a staggering sum, easily enough to fund several years of comfortable living for an average family, a sum that Elara had quietly transferred without a second thought, seeing it as an investment in her family's joy, and, she had foolishly hoped, in her own. Yet, when she had tentatively inquired about the travel arrangements, perhaps a single seat on the private jet, Serafina had cut her off with a patronizing sigh, her painted nails tapping impatiently on the mahogany table. "Oh, Mother Elara, darling, we talked about this. It's simply too much for you. All that flying, the heat, the constant activity. The children are so energetic, you know. We wouldn't want you to be uncomfortable. This trip is for the children, really, to let loose." Theron had nodded in agreement, a performative frown of concern etched on his face, his gaze carefully avoiding hers. The words had been delivered with an artificial sweetness that made Elara's stomach churn even then, a sickly sweet coating over the bitter pill of rejection. She had acquiesced, as she always did, pushing down the familiar pang of being unwanted, telling herself it was for their happiness, convincing herself that her fragile health was genuinely a concern for them, not merely a convenient excuse. Now, seeing the blatant joy in their faces, the unashamed display of their opulence, the carelessly flung hashtag, Elara felt nothing but an absolute, unshakable certainty. The illusion had not merely cracked, it had shattered into a million irreparable pieces, each shard reflecting a moment of her misguided generosity, her unreciprocated love. Her fingers, steady despite the tremor that now resonated through her very soul, closed the tablet with a soft click. The sun continued to stream through the conservatory glass, its warmth a stark contrast to the internal landscape, but inside Elara, a cold, resolute winter had just begun. There would be no more second chances, no more hopeful waiting. The wellspring of her generosity, which she had mistaken for love, had finally run dry, leaving behind a parched and desolate landscape where only the bitter seeds of regret remained. To understand the profound silence that now enveloped Elara, a silence born not of despair but of an emerging strength, one had to journey back through the labyrinthine corridors of her past, a past paved with gold and shadowed by unrequited affection. Her immense fortune was not a product of her own toil, but a legacy, a testament to the brilliance and foresight of her late husband, Arthur Vance. A visionary tech entrepreneur, Arthur had built Vance Global Communications from the ground up, a sprawling conglomerate that redefined global communication, touching everything from fiber optics to early satellite technology. He was a man of quiet brilliance, meticulous planning, and unwavering integrity, who, despite his immense success, had always found solace and joy in the simple comfort of his family. When he passed away peacefully in his sleep, 20 years prior, after a long and fulfilling life, he left Elara not just a widow, but the custodian of a vast, almost unimaginable wealth. Assets stretched across continents, investments in emerging technologies, and a portfolio so diverse it seemed immune to the whims of the market. He had, with his characteristic foresight, ensured that Elara was not just financially secure, but also well-versed in the intricacies of managing such an empire, though her heart had always been more inclined towards simpler pleasures. Elara, a woman of refined tastes but simple needs, had initially felt overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it all. Her greatest desire, however, was not to amass more wealth, but to nurture the family that Arthur had cherished, to ensure his legacy lived on not just in financial terms, but in the happiness and security of their children and grandchildren. She believed, with the innocent conviction of a truly generous soul, that money could be a tool, a conduit for love and connection. She saw herself as an investor, pouring her resources not into stocks and bonds, but into familial bonds, hoping to cultivate a garden of genuine affection and loyalty, believing that her love, expressed through generosity, would eventually be reciprocated. And so, the taps of her generosity had been opened, slowly at first, then cascading into a torrent. Theron, her only son, had always been ambitious, but lacked his father's acute business acumen and relentless work ethic. After a string of spectacularly failed ventures, a disastrous .com startup in the early 2000s called CyberConnect that Elara had salvaged with a 7-figure bailout, an ill-fated luxury car dealership, Vance Motors, that bled money faster than its sold vehicles, leaving a trail of furious creditors, and a speculative real estate development in Florida that collapsed during a market downturn, leaving him with mountains of debt and legal entanglements. Elara had always been there. Each time, she had dipped into her principal, not just the interest, to cover his mounting debts, to prevent his public embarrassment, to preserve his inflated sense of self-worth. She'd paid off his creditors, renegotiated his loans, and quietly absorbed the losses, often flying to distant cities herself to handle the damage control, all while Theron promised, with unwavering conviction, "Next time, Mother, it'll be different. This is the one. You'll be so proud." He never was. His promises, like so many of his ventures, dissolved into thin air. Serafina, Theron's wife, was a different kind of burden, her ambition solely social, her currency, status. Elara had financed their sprawling, custom-built mansion in the most exclusive part of the city, the Heights, covering the hefty down payment and then, year after year, the exorbitant mortgage payments, the soaring property taxes, and even the relentless maintenance of their meticulously manicured grounds, a full-time job for a team of landscapers. She had bought them luxury cars, a new Mercedes-Benz S-Class every 3 years for Theron, a sleek Porsche Cayenne SUV for Serafina, and even a sporty Audi convertible for their daughter, Anya, upon her graduation from college. Each car was replaced not out of necessity, but out of a desire for the latest model, a subtle nod to their perpetually refreshed status, a material declaration to their peers. Elara rarely received a "thank you," only casual remarks like, "Oh, the old model was just so passé, Mother Elara. We needed something with better mileage, you know, for the environment," delivered with a straight face that belied the true reason. The grandchildren, while Elara genuinely adored them, had also been drawn into this web of entitlement, their innocence slowly eroded by the constant flow of luxury. Their private school tuition, from kindergarten through university, at the prestigious Academia Vance, was covered entirely by Elara's trust fund, which also funded their lavish school trips abroad and their exclusive extracurriculars. Anya, while studying abroad in Paris, had her lavish apartment in Le Marais, her extensive designer wardrobe, a new outfit for every day of the week, it seemed, and constant travel expenses funded entirely by her grandmother, often sending back photos of herself on exotic ski trips or at exclusive fashion shows, never once asking if Elara would like to join. Liam, her grandson, a budding artist, had his entire art studio, expensive supplies sourced from Europe, and even a gallery space rental in the trendy downtown district paid for by Elara, despite his art never quite taking off, remaining largely abstract and incomprehensible to anyone outside his immediate circle of equally indulgent friends. Their allowances, once a modest sum for pocket money, had ballooned into monthly stipends that could support a small family, allowing them to indulge in exclusive clubs, high-end fashion, and frequent international trips with their friends, often without a second thought for their grandmother. Elara had financed Serafina's endless pursuit of youth and beauty, the discreet plastic surgeries that subtly altered her features over the years, the extravagant spa retreats to remote islands, the designer wardrobes that were refreshed seasonally, often with items worn only once before being relegated to the back of the closet. She bankrolled their elaborate, star-studded parties, from which she herself was often subtly excluded or relegated to a quiet corner, a benevolent, silent benefactor sipping a single glass of water while the revelry swirled around her, a lonely island in a sea of her own making. She recalled one particularly painful instance when she had offered to help Serafina plan a charity gala, eager to feel useful and involved, to contribute something other than money. Serafina had chuckled dismissively, her laughter tinkling like wind chimes. "Oh, Mother Elara, darling, it's a very high-profile event. We wouldn't want you to be overwhelmed by all the press and socialites. It's better if you just contribute financially, as you always do. Your name on the donor list is quite enough." The disrespect was not just financial. It permeated every aspect of their interactions. Theron would condescendingly explain the simplest technological concepts to her, as if she were a child, despite her having managed Arthur's vast technological empire for decades. Serafina would openly disparage Elara's quiet hobbies, her love for classical music, her passion for gardening, her preference for solitude and long walks in nature, labeling them quaint or boring, suggesting she needed more excitement in her life, a veiled criticism of Elara's unwillingness to engage in their shallow social scene. They would often cancel plans with her at the last minute, citing vague social engagements or sudden illnesses, only for Elara to see them flaunting their activities online hours later, at some exclusive restaurant or gala. They would gossip about her behind her back, complaining to their friends about her eccentricities and her old-fashioned ways, all while simultaneously demanding more financial assistance, often with a subtle hint that her continued generosity was a given, an unspoken obligation. Elara, in her quiet dignity, had absorbed it all. She had convinced herself that this was the price of keeping her family close, of ensuring their happiness. She would look at old photographs of Arthur, a man who had understood her without words, whose love was truly unconditional, and yearn for a connection that went beyond transactional exchange. She wanted love, genuine respect, a simple hug that wasn't accompanied by a request for money, a shared laugh that wasn't followed by a discussion of their next expenditure. She had clung to the hope that one day, they would see her, truly see her, not just as a bottomless ATM, but as a mother, a grandmother, a person with feelings, with a heart that ached for genuine affection. That hope, however, had just been extinguished, irrevocably, by a few carefree hashtags and the image of a private yacht sailing into a horizon she was deemed too strenuous to reach. The decades of silent suffering had finally reached their crescendo, culminating in a profound and irreversible shift. The decision, once made, settled in Alara's heart with an unyielding finality. The Arctic calm that had descended upon her earlier had solidified into a bedrock of resolve. There was no anger, no hysteria, only a profound sense of clarity, a crystal-clear understanding of the true nature of her relationships. For too long, she had been a victim of her own misguided generosity, mistaking obligation for love, dependence for devotion. The image of Theron and Seraphina, laughing on that distant yacht, their faces alight with sun-kissed pleasure, was not just the last straw, it was the sharp, clean cut that severed the Gordian knot of her emotional entanglement, freeing her from a self-imposed prison. Her first call was to Mr. Alastair Finch, her long-standing, impeccably discreet financial advisor. His voice, usually warm and deferential, held a hint of surprise when Alara's request came through. "Mr. Finch," Alara began, her voice steady, devoid of emotion, each word carefully chosen. "I need to make immediate and comprehensive changes to my financial arrangements. Effective immediately, I want all standing orders, direct debits, and credit lines associated with my son, Theron Vance, and his wife, Seraphina Vance, to be terminated. That includes their mortgage payments for the Heights, their car leases, the grandchildren's allowances, the private school tuitions for Academia Vance, and any other expenses I have been covering, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant." Mr. Finch, a man who had seen the ebb and flow of vast fortunes and the often unseemly demands of beneficiaries, paused, the silence stretching across the phone line. "Mrs. Vance, are you quite certain? This is a rather significant change. It will have immediate and profound implications for them. Their entire financial structure, as you know, is reliant on these arrangements." "I am entirely certain, Mr. Finch," Alara replied, a steel core evident in her tone. "Furthermore, I require a new, completely separate and confidential bank account to be opened. All remaining assets, save for my personal living expenses, are to be transferred into this new account. I will provide details for my personal budget. And finally, I need to amend my will. I wish to disinherit Theron and Seraphina Vance entirely. My new will shall designate a different, unexpected heir. This must be handled with the utmost discretion and speed, Mr. Finch. I trust your judgment implicitly." Mr. Finch, understanding the gravity of her tone and the unwavering resolve in her voice, simply said, "As you wish, Mrs. Vance. Consider it done. I will personally oversee every detail. My team will commence the process immediately. You will have all necessary documents for your review and signature by tomorrow morning." Over the next few days, Alara worked with Mr. Finch and her legal team, meticulously reviewing every single financial thread connecting her to her family. It was an exhaustive process, revealing the sheer scale of their dependence, a monthly average that could sustain a small village. She authorized the sale of several properties that had been technically theirs but maintained entirely by her, including a summer house in the Hamptons and a ski chalet in Aspen, and redirected the proceeds. She revoked all power of attorney previously granted to Theron, a power he had, on several occasions, almost abused to secure loans or make investments without her full knowledge. Each signature, each confirmation, was a small victory, a reclaiming of her own autonomy, a quiet revolution. A strange, exhilarating lightness began to replace the familiar ache in her chest, a sense of control she hadn't felt in decades. The first ripple of panic in the Vance's opulent world occurred 2 days after Theron and Seraphina returned, still basking in their sun-kissed glow, their minds still on the Seychelles. Seraphina, attempting to purchase a new, exclusive designer handbag, a limited edition, Hermès Birkin, she had been eyeing, at a high-end boutique she frequented, had her credit card declined. Not once, but twice. The sales assistant, usually fawning, looked at her with a hint of suspicion. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Vance, it appears the card has been cancelled. Perhaps there's been an issue with the bank? Serafina, mortified, her carefully constructed composure threatening to shatter, pulled out another card, a different bank, a platinum card she rarely used, only for it to meet the same fate. She stormed out, blaming the incompetence of the bank, muttering about Alara's poor choice of financial institutions and her senile forgetfulness. Later that day, Theron's new Mercedes-Benz, only a few months old, was unexpectedly repossessed from their driveway. Two stern-faced men from the finance company had shown up with paperwork, explaining that the lease payments had ceased. Theron, initially furious, believing it to be a clerical error, a simple administrative oversight, called the dealership, then his bank, then Mr. Finch's office, only to be politely but firmly rebuffed. There must be a mistake. My mother handles all my payments. She never misses anything, he roared into the phone, his face turning an alarming shade of crimson. The bank representative calmly informed him that all automatic payments from the associated account had been discontinued by the account holder, with specific instructions to prevent any further transactions. The children, Anya and Liam, soon faced their own rude awakenings. Anya's substantial monthly allowance, which usually arrived like clockwork on the first of the month, failed to appear, leaving her unable to pay for her extravagant weekend plans with friends, a luxury retreat to a ski resort in Vermont. She tried to use her credit card, only to find it declined, just like her mother's. Liam's art supply store bill bounced, humiliating him in front of his peers, who mocked his suddenly unfunded artistic endeavors. The private school bursar called, politely but firmly, to inform Serafina that the tuition for the upcoming term had not been received, and if not paid within 48 hours, the children's enrollment would be suspended, jeopardizing their academic future and social standing. The Vances, for the first time in their adult lives, experienced the cold, hard reality of financial scarcity. Panic began to set in, a cold dread seeping into the grand, silent halls of their mansion. Their calls to Alara were initially dismissive, tinged with irritation and a sense of entitlement. "Mother, there's a problem with the bank, they've messed up our payments. Can you sort it out? This is causing us a great deal of inconvenience. Grandma, my allowance isn't here, what's going on? I have plans." Alara's phone, usually buzzing with their demands, now rang incessantly, its persistent chirping a testament to their growing desperation. She let it ring, watching their names flash across the screen, a quiet, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. She felt no malice, only a profound sense of detachment, a liberating freedom. She was no longer their ATM, no longer their convenient scapegoat. The musket that had once gushed boundless wealth had been turned off. And the Vances, for the first time in their adult lives, were left stranded in a desert of their own making, their mirage of perpetual luxury evaporating under the harsh sun of reality. The knock on Alara's front door was not a polite tap, but a desperate, insistent pounding that resonated through the quiet elegance of her home, shaking the antique glass panes. She knew who it was. The moment she had awaited, and prepared for with quiet deliberation, had arrived. Slowly, deliberately, Alara rose from her favorite armchair, smoothed the fabric of her silk dress, a soft, dove gray that spoke of understated grace, and walked towards the entrance. She opened the door to find Theron, Serafina, Anya, and Liam standing on her porch, their faces a chaotic canvas of fear, anger, and manufactured distress, their designer clothes looking slightly rumpled, their usual polish diminished. Theron, his usual air of self-importance replaced by a haggard desperation, stepped forward, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and accusations. "Mother, what in God's name is going on? We've tried to call you 100 times. Our cards are declined, my car was repossessed, the children's school fees are unpaid. Have you lost your mind?" His voice was a blend of accusation and feigned concern, carefully calibrated to sound like a worried son, though the underlying current of anger was unmistakable. Serafina, ever the dramatic, rushed past him, tears already welling in her eyes, though her cheeks remained suspiciously dry. Mother Alara, darling, please. You must be ill. Are you feeling all right? This isn't like you. Think of the grandchildren. They're so upset, so confused. Their whole lives are being disrupted. She attempted to embrace Alara, but Alara subtly stepped back, her gaze unwavering, her posture erect and unyielding. The scent of Serafina's expensive perfume, usually a comforting presence, now felt heavy, almost suffocating. Enter, Alara said, her voice calm, utterly devoid of warmth, like ice fracturing. We have much to discuss. They spilled into her living room, a space usually filled with the quiet rustle of books or the gentle strains of classical music, now thick with unspoken tension, heavy with their accusations and fears. Theron paced nervously, his expensive loafers squeaking on the polished floor, while Serafina dabbed at her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief she had produced from her designer handbag. Anya and Liam stood awkwardly by the fireplace, their usual bravado replaced by an unfamiliar anxiety, their gazes darting around the room, avoiding their grandmother's unwavering eyes. Mother, Theron began, adopting a soothing, manipulative tone, as if speaking to a fragile child. We understand you might be feeling overwhelmed. Perhaps with your advanced age, you're forgetting things, or making some impulsive decisions. But you can't just cut us off like this. We are your family. Your flesh and blood. Your only son. Yes, Grandma, Anya chimed in, her voice trembling slightly, her composure finally cracking. All my friends are talking. I can't even go to the club anymore. And Liam's art supplies, how is he supposed to pursue his passion? This is so unfair. Alara listened, her expression unreadable, a serene mask. She let them speak, let them vent their outrage and their carefully constructed pleas, their complaints echoing the very entitlement that had defined their lives. She saw their true faces, stripped bare of their usual masks of civility and charm. The entitled, manipulative children she had raised, not with genuine love, but with endless financial indulgence, mistaking her quiet generosity for boundless weakness. Are you done? Alara asked, her voice cutting through the rising tide of their complaints, clear and sharp as crystal. Her eyes, usually soft and forgiving, were now like chips of ice, reflecting no warmth, no sympathy. Because I am. She took a deep breath, and then, slowly, calmly, she began to speak, her voice gaining a quiet power, each word a precise, deliberate strike. For decades, I have poured my heart, my time, and my entire fortune into this family. Not because I owed you anything, but because I loved you. I wanted to see you happy, to give you every opportunity, to honor Arthur's legacy. I paid for Theron's failed businesses, bailouts totaling millions that vanished into thin air, leaving only debt and embarrassment. I bought you that sprawling house, the Heights, paid your mortgage for 20 years, and replaced your luxury cars every few years simply because you desired the latest model, not out of necessity. Serafina, I funded your lavish lifestyle, your endless shopping sprees for designer clothes you wore once, your cosmetic procedures, your extravagant parties from which I was always subtly excluded or relegated to a corner. I sent my grandchildren to the most exclusive schools, provided them with allowances that exceeded most people's salaries, and covered their every whim and fancy, from designer handbags to international art supplies. Theron tried to interrupt, Mother, that's not fair. We appreciated it. We truly did. Alara raised a hand, stopping him cold, her gaze unwavering. No, Theron, you did not. You never appreciated it. You expected it. You saw me not as a mother, but as an ATM, a never-ending source of funds. You took my generosity for granted, and in return, you offered me condescension, disrespect, and exclusion. You ridiculed my choices, dismissed my feelings, and openly disparaged me behind my back, often to the very friends who now avoid your calls. Her gaze landed specifically on Theron and Serafina, her voice tightening with the weight of decades of unspoken pain. The final insult, the true catalyst, was that vacation. I gave you a small fortune for a family trip to the Seychelles, a trip you then explicitly excluded me from, claiming it was too strenuous for me, while flaunting your extravagance online, for all the world to see, with those deliberately cruel hashtags. That blatant act of humiliation, of public ingratitude, shattered the last illusion I held. It made me realize that I was not investing in love or loyalty, but enabling a parasitic relationship, one that was slowly but surely draining my spirit. Theron, recovering some of his bravado, stepped forward, his voice a low growl, laced with thinly veiled threats. "You're old, Mother. You're not thinking clearly. This is a cruel joke. You can't just disinherit us. We are your rightful heirs. The will Arthur left ensures that. You can't just overturn decades of legal precedent." Serafina, seeing an opening, added with feigned sympathy, her voice sickly sweet, "Perhaps, Mother Alara, darling, you need some rest. You're clearly under a lot of stress. We've already taken steps to ensure your comfort and security. We've even discussed updating your will, to make sure everything is in order, given your recent forgetfulness. Just to make sure everything is handled properly, should anything happen." She gave Theron a subtle, knowing glance, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. Alara's lips curved into a faint, chilling smile, a smile that held no warmth, only a profound, silent victory. "Ah, the will. How interesting you bring that up, Serafina. You see, I am quite aware of Arthur's original will. And I am also aware of your desperate, panicked scheme to forge a new one, or significantly alter the existing one, convinced that my health was declining, that my mind was failing, and that I would soon be gone, leaving you to inherit everything. Mr. Finch, during a routine audit, brought your inquiries and attempts to draft new documents to my attention. Your attempts to gain control of my financial affairs behind my back, convincing lawyers I was no longer competent, were quite audacious." Theron and Serafina froze, their faces draining of color, the blood visibly receding from their cheeks. The casual confidence they had worn earlier evaporated, replaced by a dawning horror, a sudden, stark realization that their darkest secret had been exposed. Anya and Liam, listening in stunned silence, looked between their parents and their grandmother, sensing the true depth of the betrayal. "You underestimated me," Alara continued, her voice gaining strength, each word a hammer blow. "You assumed my quiet demeanor was weakness, my patience, ignorance. While you were busy crafting your deceitful documents, I was busy making my own arrangements. I contacted Mr. Finch, my financial advisor, and my lawyers. All financial support has been irrevocably terminated. Every penny, every asset, every account that linked me to your insatiable greed, has been cut off. You no longer have access to a single cent of my fortune." She paused, letting the silence hang heavy, broken only by Serafina's sharp, terrified intake of breath. "And as for the will you so meticulously planned to forge, you wasted your time. Because I had already established a substantial, secret bank account, one you knew nothing about, completely separate from the estate you believed was yours. And my will, my actual will, has been revised. Not to leave you a single penny. It names a new, surprising heir, someone who truly deserves it." Theron stared, mouth agape, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him with a sickening crunch. "A new heir? Who? Who could you possibly leave everything to? We are your family. Your blood." His voice was a desperate, primal scream, devoid of his usual polished veneer. Alara's eyes, now blazing with a quiet triumph, met his. "Someone who showed me genuine kindness, respect, and loyalty, not just when I was giving them money, but always. Someone who saw me, truly saw me, as a human being, not a financial resource. Someone who valued my advice, my presence, and my quiet company. And that, Theron, is something you and your wife have never been capable of." The silence that followed was deafening, filled with the crushing weight of their shattered expectations. Elara had not raised her voice, she had not lost her composure. She had simply, methodically, dismantled their entire world with surgical precision, leaving them utterly exposed. And in that moment, she felt a profound sense of liberation, a lightness she hadn't experienced in decades. The decision was final. The gates of her benevolence were not merely closed, they were sealed shut, for good. She looked at their pale, horrified faces, and for the first time in a very long time, felt truly free. The drive back to their mansion was a morbid tableau of silent despair, punctuated by choked sobs and bitter curses. Theron gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, his face a mask of disbelief and incandescent rage. Serafina sat beside him, her earlier theatrical tears replaced by genuine, messy sobs, punctuated by gasps of horror and disbelief. Anya and Liam huddled in the back, the silence broken only by Anya's occasional sniffle and Liam's quiet, frustrated curses. Their world, built on a foundation of inherited wealth and unquestioning indulgence, had just imploded, leaving them adrift in a sea of their own making. "She's gone mad." Theron finally spat, slamming his fist on the dashboard, making the expensive leather creak. "Completely senile. We have to contest it. The forged will, no, the original. We have to prove she's unfit. We'll get a team of lawyers, the best." His voice was ragged, filled with a frantic desperation. Serafina's voice was hoarse, her throat raw from crying. "But she knows, Theron. She knew about the forged will." "How? How could she possibly know? And a secret account? A new heir? Who on earth could it be? This is a nightmare." The questions hung in the air, unanswered, fueling their mounting panic and a creeping dread. The initial consequences were swift and brutal, a cascade of financial and social ruin. Within days, the luxury cars were all repossessed, including Serafina's Porsche and Anya's convertible, taken by stern-faced men with grim efficiency. The finance companies, acting on Elara's instructions to terminate all linked accounts, wasted no time. Their meticulously landscaped garden began to wither, the vibrant hydrangeas turning brown, as the gardeners, unpaid, stopped showing up. The housekeepers, the personal chef, the personal trainers, the myriad of staff who had sustained their lavish lifestyle, all vanished, leaving the mansion eerily quiet, coated in a fine layer of dust. The mansion, once a vibrant hub of lavish parties and social activity, became a cavernous, echoing mausoleum of their former life, a grand prison. The most devastating blow came a week later, when a formal notice of foreclosure arrived, slipped under their opulent front door. With the mortgage payments halted, the bank was moving to reclaim the property, threatening to seize everything within its walls. Theron, who had always viewed the mansion as an unassailable symbol of his success, his very identity, now faced the utter humiliation of losing it entirely, along with any shred of credibility he had left. He tried to argue, to plead, to stall, but the bank was unyielding. Their social standing, which Serafina had painstakingly cultivated for decades with extravagant parties and carefully curated friendships, began to crumble with astonishing speed. Whispers circulated through their exclusive circles, fueled by the very people who had once fawned over them. Friends, who had once flocked to their lavish parties and enjoyed their generosity, now avoided their calls, their text messages going unanswered. Invitations to exclusive events stopped arriving, and when they did, they were quickly rescinded. The Vances, once at the apex of their social pyramid, were now pariahs, their financial ruin a juicy piece of gossip, a cautionary tale whispered over expensive champagne. Anya and Liam, who had always relied on Elara's largesse, found themselves adrift in a world they barely recognized. The private school had indeed suspended their enrollment, forcing them to consider public school for the first time in their lives, a prospect they found utterly mortifying, a public admission of their fallen status. Their allowances, once a constant stream, had dried up completely, leaving them unable to maintain their extravagant lifestyles or keep up with their friends. Anya was forced to sell some of her designer handbags and clothing on an online resale platform, receiving a fraction of their original cost. Liam, facing the same financial crunch, sold off some of his expensive art supplies, realizing with a crushing sense of reality that their carefree existence had been entirely contingent on their grandmother's money, a truth that was both humiliating and terrifying. Theron and Serafina desperately tried to find alternative sources of income. Theron, who had not genuinely worked in years, his previous ventures simply well-funded hobbies, found his business contacts unwilling to trust him with new ventures, given his history of failed projects and recent public disgrace. Serafina, whose only job had been managing their social calendar and spending Alara's money, found herself utterly unqualified for any real employment beyond the most basic retail positions, which she found beneath her. They tried to sell off some of their remaining valuables, the expensive art and antiques that adorned their walls, but the market was saturated, and their desperation drove prices down. Blame began to fester between them, erupting into bitter, screaming arguments that echoed through their increasingly empty mansion. "It's your fault, Serafina. You pushed her too far with that vacation. Your greed destroyed us." Theron would shout, his face contorted in rage. "My fault? You were the one always asking for more, Theron. And you always let her walk all over you. You never stood up to her." Serafina would retort, their opulent prison now a battleground of resentment and recrimination. Meanwhile, in her quiet conservatory, Alara breathed. She felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in decades, a profound sense of peace that permeated her very being. The silence in her home was no longer lonely, it was liberating, a sanctuary. The weight of endless obligation, of unreciprocated love and constant financial demands, had been lifted. Her first act of true self-indulgence, not indulgence for others, was a simple one, yet deeply satisfying. She called Clara, a dear friend from her youth, someone who had always shown her genuine affection and understanding, never once asking for anything, simply enjoying Alara's company. "Clara," Alara said, a genuine smile in her voice, "I'd like to book that trip to Patagonia we always talked about. Just the two of us. My treat. No expense spared, for the joy of it." Clara, surprised and delighted, readily agreed, her excitement infectious. Alara then spent a blissful afternoon in her garden, potting new roses, feeling the rich earth in her hands, a simple pleasure she had neglected for years, always feeling too burdened, too emotionally drained by her family's relentless demands. For the first time, Alara Vance was truly living for herself, reclaiming her life with every breath. Months turned into a year, and the seasons cycled through, bringing with them not just changes in the weather, but profound transformations in the lives of the Vance family and, most importantly, Alara. Alara Vance was thriving. Her days were now filled with purpose and genuine joy, a stark contrast to the quiet suffering that had once defined her existence. The trip to Patagonia with Clara had been magnificent, a breathtaking adventure through majestic landscapes that reaffirmed the beauty of true friendship and the thrill of discovery. She had rediscovered her passion for painting, setting up an easel in her conservatory, translating the vibrant colors of her meticulously tended garden onto canvas, her strokes confident and expressive. She took classes at a local art studio, engaging with fellow artists, her mind sharp and invigorated by new challenges, finding unexpected camaraderie. She became deeply involved with a local literacy charity, dedicating her time and a significant portion of her newly managed funds to a cause she deeply believed in, seeing direct, tangible impact. Her once guarded heart had opened, not to the demands of her family, but to the warmth of genuine human connection, nurtured through shared interests and mutual respect. She hosted small, intimate dinners for friends who cherished her for who she was, not for what she possessed, for her quiet wisdom and newfound zest for life. The quiet dignity that had always been her hallmark now radiated as an undeniable inner strength, a serene and powerful presence. And the surprise heir? It was Miss Eleanor Hayes, Arthur's former executive assistant. Eleanor, a woman in her late 40s, precise and quietly brilliant, had remained a steadfast presence in Alara's life long after Arthur's passing. She had always treated Alara with immense respect, kindness, and genuine concern, often checking in on her, offering practical help with estate matters, and engaging in meaningful conversations about books and current events, never once hinting at any financial need or expectation. Eleanor, who ran a small, struggling nonprofit dedicated to providing STEM education for underprivileged girls, was stunned and deeply moved by Alara's decision. The inheritance, substantial and now free from the demands of Alara's former family, allowed Eleanor to expand her nonprofit significantly, building new facilities, hiring more teachers, and reaching thousands of girls who would otherwise never have had such opportunities. It was creating a lasting legacy of opportunity and empowerment, exactly the kind of true, positive impact Alara wanted her fortune to have. Alara found immense satisfaction in seeing her wealth used for true, positive change, rather than fueling shallow extravagance and endless consumption. As for Theron and Seraphina, their once glittering world had irrevocably dimmed. They had indeed lost the mansion, forced to sell off most of their remaining possessions to cover debts and legal fees. They now lived in a modest apartment on the outskirts of the city, stripped of their social status and most of their material comforts. Theron, after several failed attempts to resurrect his business career, having burned too many bridges, had taken a low-paying administrative job in a regional office, a stark contrast to his former life of self-proclaimed entrepreneurship. Seraphina, after a brief, disastrous stint in retail where her arrogance alienated customers and colleagues alike, found work as an assistant in a small, provincial real estate office, barely making enough to cover her own meager expenses. They were forced to budget, to work, and to live within their means, a harsh and humbling lesson they had never learned. Their relationship, once fueled by shared ambition and material pursuits, was now strained, marked by resentment, bitter arguments, and the crushing weight of shattered dreams. Anya and Liam, too, faced the unvarnished truth of self-reliance. They had completed their education at local public institutions, a jarring transition from their privileged upbringing, and both were now working entry-level jobs, struggling to make ends meet. Anya found work in a local cafe, serving coffee, a far cry from her glamorous Parisian life. Liam worked at a framing shop, handling canvases for others, his own artistic dreams largely unrealized. They still complained, but the complaints were now tinged with a nascent understanding of the value of hard work, a concept entirely alien to their upbringing. They had even, on rare occasions, reached out to Alara, not with demands, but with tentative inquiries about her well-being, a fragile seed of genuine concern finally sprouting in the barren soil of their self-interest. Alara responded kindly, but kept a firm boundary, offering advice and support, but no longer financial aid. She offered to help them with resumes, with career guidance, but never with money. Alara had learned that true love and respect cannot be bought, nor can genuine connection be manufactured through financial subsidy. Her journey had been one from quiet suffering to profound liberation, a testament to the power of setting boundaries and honoring one's own worth. The greatest act of generosity she had ever performed was not the money she gave away, but the strength she found within herself to reclaim her life, her peace, and her dignity. Her wealth, once a tool for others' fleeting happiness, was now a catalyst for genuine impact, a quiet testament to a life finally lived on her own terms, surrounded by the true treasures of kindness and respect. If you found Alara's powerful story of resilience and reclaiming her life compelling, you'll love our other tales of justice, self-discovery, and profound life lessons. We believe everyone deserves to live a life of dignity and respect. Don't miss out on more stories like Alara's. Subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you're always updated when we release a new video. And now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever encountered such ingratitude in your own life, or witnessed someone bravely stand up for themselves against exploitation? What would you have done in Alara's shoes when faced with such profound disrespect? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We love reading your insights.